If you succeed, I will marry you.
Play this Beethoven Sonata and I'll marry you. Nathan's voice rang out over the stunned rooftop, his words laced with that signature arrogant smirk everyone knew too well. The laughter started immediately, nervous at first, then louder, rolling through the crowd like it was the best party joke of the year. Phones flashed, capturing the moment. A tech mogul near the bar snorted into his drink. Classic Nathan. Always the showman. A socialite whispered to her friend, "He's totally bluffing, she'll crash and burn and we'll all get a good story." Lila Whitaker stood frozen in her ruined red gown, champagne still dripping from the hem, her smile tight and brittle. She forced a laugh, playing along. "Very funny, darling," she called out, loud enough for the nearest cameras to catch. "You've had your fun." "She's not actually going to." But Nathan didn't take his eyes off the maid. Camille Brooks, uniform soaked, apron clinging, hand steady despite the tremor in her breath, stared back at him from the edge of the crowd. The sheet music he'd thrust at her earlier lay open on the Steinway stand, Beethoven's Appassionata glaring up like a dare from hell itself. The laughter began to fade as Camille walked forward. No hesitation. No pleading. Just the soft click of her practical black shoes on the marble. She sat at the bench. The rooftop went dead quiet. Lila's forced smile wavered. "Nathan, tell her to stop. This isn't." He raised a hand, silencing her without looking away from Camille. Camille closed her eyes. Then she played. The first notes erupted, furious, precise, alive with a power that ripped the air apart. Fingers flying, dynamics shifting like a storm breaking over the city. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't amateur. It was world-class, soul-shattering, the kind of playing that belonged in concert halls, not on a billionaire's rooftop. One by one mouths fell open. Phones lowered slightly as people forgot to record, too mesmerized to move. Lila's face drained of color. Nathan's smirk vanished. And when the final devastating chord crashed and faded into the night, leaving only the distant hum of LA traffic below, nobody laughed. Not a single person. Camille lifted her hands from the keys. She looked straight at Nathan. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she asked, quiet but clear enough for every microphone to catch. "So, when do I get my ring?" "Before we continue, I want to speak to you for a moment. If stories like this remind you that kindness still exists, if they make you feel something real in a world that's getting louder and colder, then I'd love to have you here with us. This channel isn't just videos, it's a tiny corner of the internet where good people come together. Where we believe in second chances, in hope, and in humanity. And right now you're early. You're part of the very first people building this family with me. So if you want to grow with us, if you want more stories that touch your heart, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, it supports the channel more than you know. And it tells me that there are still people out there who believe in kindness just as much as I do. If you have subscribed to this channel, I can officially say welcome to the family. Los Angeles never sleeps, but on this New Year's Eve, the real party was 30 stories above downtown, on the private rooftop of the Hargrove Tower, the tallest residential building on the West Coast, owned lock, stock, and skyline by Nathan Hargrove. Nathan didn't just build skyscrapers. He owned half the ones that defined the LA horizon. At 37, he was the youngest self-made billionaire in California real estate, the guy who turned empty lots into billion-dollar mixed-use empires and made Forbes covers look like yearbook photos. His penthouse rooftop had hosted Oscar winners, tech titans, and even a sitting governor. Tonight it was packed with 500 of the city's most connected people, all there to celebrate Nathan's engagement to Lila Whitaker, daughter of old East Coast money, rising lifestyle influencer, and the woman every tabloid called the perfect match for America's most eligible builder. Nathan and Lila had been the golden couple for 18 months. It started at a charity auction in the Hamptons. She bid on a weekend at his Napa vineyard, he outbid everyone just to meet her, and the rest wrote itself in page 6 headlines. She loved the spotlight. He loved the stability she brought to his boardroom image. The wedding was set for spring, big, glossy, and exactly what his family trust demanded if he wanted full control of the Hargrove fortune by his 38th birthday. The rooftop was pure LA glamour. Infinity pool glowing electric blue, heat lamps pushing back the December chill, a string quartet playing soft jazz covers, and a custom Steinway Grand parked near the edge so guests could look out over the city lights while sipping $1,000 champagne. Camille Brooks was invisible in the middle of it all. She'd been waitstaff for high-end events like this for 4 years, quiet, efficient, always keeping her head down. The black uniform, the tight bun, the practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. She needed the money for Jordan, her 17-year-old brother, whose rare spinal condition had already drained everything their parents left behind. One more year of tips, one more surgery paid for, that was the plan. Tonight she was circulating with a tray of vintage Dom Perignon when she heard Lila's sharp laugh near the bar. "Nathan, tell them the pianist we booked for the wedding is fine. I don't want anything too serious." Nathan, tall in his midnight blue tux, glanced up from his phone. "Lila, no one's going to care about the music once the open bar hits." Camille approached to refill their flutes. A tipsy venture capitalist stumbled backward, elbow slamming into her tray. Time slowed. The bottle tipped. Champagne exploded across Lila's custom gold gown in a glittering arc. Gasps rippled outward. "You clumsy," Lila's shriek cut the night. "This is Oscar de la Renta. Do you have any idea?" "I'm so sorry, Ms. Whitaker," Camille started, already reaching for napkins. Someone bumped. "I don't care." Lila snapped, face flushed. "Get the manager. I want her fired. Tonight." The event supervisor appeared instantly, sweating. "Ms. Whitaker, Mr. Hargrove, deepest apologies. Camille, you're off the floor." Nathan, who'd been watching in silence, finally spoke. His voice was low, amused, dangerous. "Wait." Everyone froze. He looked at Camille, really looked, for the first time. She stood straight, chin up, no tears. Something about her steadied gaze caught him off guard. "Firing her seems boring," he said, a slow grin spreading. "We're celebrating, right? Let's make it fun." Lila laughed nervously. "Nathan." He walked to the Steinway, flipped open the abandoned sheet music, Beethoven's Sonata, left by the guest artist who'd cancelled last minute, and turned back to the crowd. "Here's the deal," he announced, voice carrying like he owned the night itself. "Play this Beethoven Sonata, all 3 movements perfectly, and I call off the wedding with Lila," he paused for effect, eyes gleaming, "and marry you instead." The rooftop erupted in laughter. Real, rich, careless laughter. Phones came out. This was gold. Lila forced a smile, playing along. "Very funny, babe. She's not seriously going to play it." Nathan thrust the score toward Camille. "Go on," he said, smirk wide. "Play this Beethoven Sonata and I'll marry you." The crowd roared louder, convinced it was the ultimate setup for humiliation. Camille's heart pounded so hard she could barely hear the jokes around her. She took the music, walked to the piano, Saturday, and played. The first notes hit like a storm breaking over the city, fierce, flawless, alive with a power no one expected. Laughter died mid-breath. By the time the final devastating chord faded into the night sky, the rooftop was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Camille lifted her hands from the keys and looked straight at Nathan. "So," she said quietly, voice steady, "when's the wedding?" The silence stretched another beat. Then someone's phone notification pinged and the spell broke. But instead of laughs, there were murmurs. Phones were still recording. By sunrise, the clip, "Billionaire dares made to play Beethoven, regrets it instantly," had exploded across every platform, racking up 50 million views in hours. Nathan's inbox flooded with calls from investors, board members, even his lawyer. Back out now and he'd look like a heartless liar who toys with regular people. The joke had become a public promise he couldn't escape without torching his reputation, and the family trust deadline was ticking. Later that morning, Camille was back in her small Inglewood apartment, frantically packing a bag to vanish before the fallout hit her job. She pulled an old shoebox from under her bed, her mother's few keepsakes, and a faded photo slipped out. A young man holding a newborn baby, smiling at the camera. Camille froze. The man's face, it was the same one she'd seen last night scrolling Lila Whitaker's Instagram stories, Lila's famous music producer father. A cold chill ran down her spine. She shoved the photo back in the box, heart racing. But she couldn't unsee it. And across town, Nathan Hargrove sat in his glass-walled office, watching the viral clip of Camille on repeat. He had 3 months to get married or lose everything he'd built. And for the first time in his life, the man who owned half of LA didn't know what to do next. 3 weeks after the rooftop that changed everything, Camille Brooks stood in the marble foyer of Nathan Hargrove's downtown LA penthouse, suitcase in hand, staring up at 40-foot ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a private light show. The fake marriage had begun. It was supposed to be simple. A quick courthouse ceremony, already done, no photos, separate bedrooms on opposite wings, a few carefully staged public appearances, and a quiet divorce in 12 months. In exchange, Nathan would cover Jordan's experimental surgery at Cedars-Sinai and wipe out every medical bill Camille had been drowning in. She'd signed the contract with a steady hand, business only, no feelings, no complications. But nothing about Nathan Hargrove was simple. He'd moved her in the same week the viral video hit 200 million views. Paparazzi camped outside her old Inglewood apartment until Nathan's security team extracted her in the middle of the night. Now she had a walk-in closet bigger than her former living room, filled with designer clothes chosen by a stylist who kept calling her the new Mrs. Hargrove. Their first public date was a Lakers game courtside. Cameras everywhere, Nathan's arm around her shoulders for the Jumbotron, both of them smiling like they meant it. The headlines the next day screamed Cinderella story and Billionaire keeps viral promise. Behind closed doors it was quieter. Awkward even. Nathan worked late most nights. Camille spent her days with Jordan at the hospital, watching his physical therapy improve faster than anyone expected thanks to Nathan's money. Evenings were polite small talk over takeout in the massive kitchen, until the night everything cracked open. It was past midnight. Camille couldn't sleep, so she wandered down to the living room with its panoramic view of the glowing skyline. She found Nathan at the Steinway, the same one from the rooftop, now moved here, playing softly, fingers moving over the keys with surprising skill. He stopped when he saw her. "Didn't know you played," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "My mom taught me," he answered quietly. She was supposed to debut at Disney Hall before she got sick. This was her piano. Camille walked over and sat beside him on the bench. Without thinking, she picked up where he left off, playing a gentle Chopin nocturne her own mother had loved. For the first time since moving in, the silence between them felt easy. They started talking. Really talking. About Jordan. About Nathan's pressure to look stable for the board. About how Camille had given up music after the accident that took her parents and changed her brother's life forever. Night after night, the conversations grew longer. Boundaries blurred. Stolen glances during public events turned into real smiles. One evening, after a charity gala, Nathan's hand lingered on the small of her back a little too long in the elevator ride home. But outside the penthouse walls, Lila Whitaker wasn't going quietly. She'd been radio silent for weeks, until the morning she showed up unannounced at the tower lobby, demanding to see Camille. Security let her up. Nathan was in a meeting downtown. Lila stormed into the living room in head-to-toe Chanel, eyes blazing, clutching a manila envelope. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think you can just slide into my life?" Camille stayed calm. "Lila, it's not." "Shut up." Lila threw the envelope onto the coffee table. Papers scattered, lab reports, DNA charts, a paternity test stamped with an official seal. Camille picked one up. Her stomach dropped. The results were clear. 99.9% probability. Shared father. Marcus Whitaker. Lila's dad, the legendary music producer who'd shaped half the Billboard charts in the 90s and aughts. Camille's hands shook. This can't be real." "Oh, it's real," Lila said, voice trembling with rage and something that almost sounded like hurt. "Dad had an affair with your mother 29 years ago. You're the daughter he never claimed. My half-sister." The room spun. Camille sank onto the couch. All those years wondering why her father had vanished before she was born. The faded photo she'd found after the rooftop night suddenly made horrible sense. Lila wasn't done. "And guess what?" she said, pulling out one final document, a scanned will dated just months ago. "Dad's dying. Lung cancer. And in his new will, he's splitting his entire music empire, catalogs, royalties, everything worth hundreds of millions, evenly between his two daughters." She laughed bitterly. "Congratulations, sis. You're not just marrying my ex-fiancé. You're about to become my equal." Camille looked up, eyes wide, the weight of it all crashing down. Across town, Nathan's board was already scheduling an emergency meeting. Whispers of conflict of interest and hostile takeover risk circling like sharks. The fake marriage had just become the most dangerous kind of real. And no one, not Nathan, not Camille, not even Lila, knew how deep the family secrets went yet. Camille had never felt more out of place than she did sitting at Nathan Hargrove's 12-seat glass dining table, staring at a breakfast spread that probably cost more than her old monthly rent. It had been 6 weeks since Lila's bombshell confrontation. 6 weeks since the words half-sister had turned her world upside down. The tabloids were having a field day, Cinderella or con artist. Billionaire's maid bride is secret Whittaker heiress. Every grocery store checkout line screamed new headlines. Camille avoided mirrors, she barely recognized the woman in the designer clothes staring back. Nathan, for his part, had gone into full damage control mode. Publicly, he played the smitten groom, hand-holding at premieres, sweet Instagram posts, interviews where he called the rooftop dare, the best mistake I ever made. Privately, he was drowning in conference calls, trying to keep his board from panicking over the sudden Whittaker connection. Because Marcus Whittaker, Lila and Camille's father, wasn't just a music legend. His empire included stakes in streaming platforms, venue chains, and real estate partnerships that directly competed with Hargrove developments in downtown revitalization projects. And now Camille owned half of it. Or would, once the will was probated. Marcus was still alive, but fading fast in a private Malibu clinic. He'd reached out once, a handwritten letter delivered by courier, asking to meet both daughters. Camille couldn't bring herself to open it yet. Lila, on the other hand, had become a ghost haunting the edges of their lives. Cryptic texts, anonymous tips to gossip sites, flowers sent to the penthouse with cards that read family first. Nathan tried to shield Camille from most of it, but the tension was wearing on him. Late nights, he'd pace the living room, phone glued to his ear, voice tight as he argued with board members who suddenly saw his viral bride as a liability. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Camille found him at the Steinway again, playing the slow movement of the Appassionata, the same piece that had started everything. His touch was good but careful. Controlled. She sat beside him without asking. He stopped. "You play it better," he said quietly. "Your mom's piano deserves it." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Camille's fingers found the keys, picking up where he left off. She played the entire movement, not showing off, just letting the music pour out. 6 years of grief, fear, hope. When she finished, Nathan was staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You should play again," he said. "For real. Not for dares. Not for me." Camille shook her head. "I stopped for a reason. But the seed was planted." Jordan's progress gave her hope he hadn't earned yet. The surgery Nathan funded was working. Her brother was walking short distances with braces now, laughing more, coding apps in his hospital bed like the old days. Camille visited every afternoon, reading him the ridiculous headlines just to watch him roll his eyes. "You're famous, sis," he teased. "Should I start calling you Mrs. Billionaire?" "Absolutely not." But she smiled when she said it. The real storm hit on a rainy Thursday morning. Nathan came back from an emergency board meeting white-knuckled, tie loosened, eyes hard. "They're blocking it," he said, tossing a folder onto the kitchen island. "The wedding. The trust disbursement. Everything." Camille's stomach dropped. "What?" He poured himself a drink even though it was barely noon. "The board voted unanimously. They're labeling you a material conflict of interest. Your inheritance from Marcus Whittaker gives you voting power in companies that directly compete with ours on 3 downtown projects. If we marry, it's technically a merger of rival interests. They're threatening to invoke the morality clause in the trust, claim I'm using a sham marriage to gain competitive advantage." He laughed bitter. "They're saying I can't marry you without risking the entire company." Camille stared at the papers. Legal jargon swam in front of her eyes. "So what happens now?" Nathan downed the drink. "Now I fight them. Or..." He looked at her, something raw in his expression. "Or we call it off. Quiet divorce. You keep the money for Jordan. No one gets hurt." The words hung between them. Camille's chest tightened. She thought of late nights talking until dawn. Of the way his hand brushed hers when they passed in the hallway. Of how he'd started leaving the Steinway lid open, sheet music turned to pieces she used to love. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. Nathan didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing the woman who'd walked onto that rooftop and changed his life with 8 minutes of music. No, he said finally. It's not. But across town, Lila Whitaker was already on the phone with the board chairman, smiling for the first time in weeks. Because she knew something they didn't. The war for the Whitaker empire, and for Nathan, was just getting started. And Camille Brooks, the maid who'd played her way into a billionaire's world, was about to discover just how far people would go to keep her out of it. The private dining room at the Malibu Cliffside estate smelled of ocean salt and hospital antiseptic, even though Marcus Whitaker was no longer confined to a bed. He sat at the head of the long teak table, frail but upright, oxygen tubes discreetly tucked beneath a cashmere sweater. The Pacific crashed against the rocks below the glass walls, a restless soundtrack to what everyone knew would be the last family dinner he'd ever host. Camille arrived on Nathan's arm, her hand gripping his a little tighter than usual. Lila was already there, seated across from their father, arms crossed, eyes sharp as knives. Jordan rolled in beside Camille in his new lightweight chair, another gift from Nathan's unlimited resources, looking stronger than he had in years. No press. No lawyers. Just the five of them, a neutral moderator from the estate firm, and enough unspoken history to choke the air. Marcus spoke first, voice raspy but steady. I asked you all here because I'm running out of time to fix what I broke. He looked at Camille, really looked, for the first time in her 29 years. I knew about you the day you were born, he said quietly. Your mother sent me a letter. A picture. I was married. Lila was a toddler. I was terrified of losing everything I'd built, so I stayed away. I told myself sending money through anonymous scholarships was enough. Camille's throat tightened. She'd always wondered why her early training at Colburn had been mysteriously paid for, full ride, no questions asked. You funded me? She whispered. Marcus nodded. Every lesson. Every competition. I watched from the back of recital halls. Never close enough to speak. I was a coward. Lila's jaw clenched. And me? You were there for every one of my performances. I was wrong, Marcus said, turning to her. I overcorrected. Tried to make up for one absence by smothering the other. I hurt both of you. He reached into a folder beside him and slid 2 envelopes across the table, one to each daughter. My new will. Equal split. No favorites. No punishments. The catalogs, the royalties, the publishing, half to each of you. Together or apart, it's yours. Lila snatched hers, eyes scanning furiously. Camille didn't touch hers. Lila laughed, cold and brittle. So that's it? You think a piece of paper fixes 30 years of lies? She turned to Camille. You don't even want it, she said, voice rising. You never cared about his world. You have Nathan now, his money, his name, his empire. Walk away from this inheritance, and I'll believe you're not just another opportunist. Nathan's hand tightened on Camille's under the table. Camille met Lila's gaze. You think that's what this is about? Money? Then prove it, Lila snapped. Choose him over Dad's empire. Right now. In front of all of us. The room went silent except for the waves. Camille looked at Marcus. Why now? Why tell me at all? Marcus's eyes filled. Because I'm dying. And because... He glanced at Nathan, then back to Camille. There's something else you need to know. He gestured to a framed photo on the sideboard, one Camille hadn't noticed when they arrived. A younger Marcus standing beside a beautiful woman at a piano recital hall opening. Nathan's mother. Camille's breath caught. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Your mother and Nathan's mother were close friends? Both pianists, both rising stars. When Elena, Nathan's mom, got sick, I promised her I'd look after the people she loved. She left me her Steinway in her will. I had it restored and anonymously donated it to the Hargrove Tower rooftop, the night of Nathan's engagement party. Nathan went very still. Camille stared at the photo, then at the man who'd shaped both their lives from the shadows. You put that piano there, on purpose? Marcus gave a small, sad smile. I knew Nathan kept it as a memorial. I thought, maybe fate would do what I never had the courage to. Lila shoved back from the table. This is insane. You orchestrated everything? No, Marcus said firmly. I gave fate a nudge. The rest was them. That night, back in the penthouse, Nathan and Camille stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Jordan had already gone to bed, exhausted but happier than Camille had seen him in years. Nathan spoke first. I didn't know, he said quietly. About the piano. About any of it. Camille nodded, tears finally falling. Our parents were connected. All this time. He turned to her, taking both her hands. Camille, I need to say something. The contract, the dare, the trust deadline, none of that matters anymore. I'm in love with you. Not the viral moment. Not the convenient fix. You. She searched his eyes. I've been falling for you too, she admitted. But I'm terrified. Of Lila. Of the board. Of losing Jordan's progress if this all falls apart. Nathan pulled her close. Then we fight together. For real this time. But across the city, Lila sat in her father's study, staring at the will. She wasn't ready to share. Not the empire. Not her father. And definitely not Nathan. She picked up her phone and dialed a contact labeled only board chair. The real battle had only just begun. The Getty Center had never looked more perfect. White roses cascaded from every archway, the late spring sun turning the travertine stone gold against the endless LA skyline. 1,500 guests filled the Garden Plaza. Hollywood royalty, tech titans, politicians, and every major news outlet on the West Coast. Drones hovered discreetly for aerial shots. The wedding of Nathan Hargrove and Camille Brooks was officially the event of the decade. Camille stood just inside the grand entrance, bouquet of white peonies trembling slightly in her hands. Her gown, custom Vera Wang silk and lace that moved like water, felt like armor and a dream at the same time. Jordan sat beside her in his chair, looking sharp in a tailored tux, grinning wider than she'd seen in years. You ready, sis? He whispered. She exhaled. As I'll ever be. Nathan waited at the altar under a floral arch, devastating in black tie, eyes locked on the spot where she would appear. No cold feet. No doubts. In the last month, the board had backed down after Nathan threatened to step aside and let them run the company without him. Marcus's health had stabilized enough for him to watch via live stream from Malibu. Even Lila had gone quiet, radio silent since the family dinner. The string quartet began the processional, a soft arrangement of a Chopin piece Camille loved. She stepped into the sunlight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like a storm. Halfway down the aisle, the music faltered. Lila Whitaker appeared at the top of the steps in blood-red silk, clutching a leather folio, face pale but triumphant. Security moved to intercept, but she held up a hand. I'm not here to stop the wedding, she called out, voice carrying over the stunned silence. I'm here to save my father's legacy. She marched down the aisle, guests parting like the Red Sea. Nathan stepped forward, shielding Camille. Lila, not today. Oh, but it has to be today, Lila said, opening the folio and pulling out a document. Because yesterday Dad signed a new will. One that leaves everything, his entire music empire, to me. His only legitimate daughter. She thrust the paper toward the nearest camera crew. Camille gets nothing. She's out. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Phone shot up. Camille's heart stopped. Nathan snatched the document, scanning it fast. This is dated yesterday. Marcus is barely conscious. Exactly, Lila cut in. He finally saw clearly. No more guilt gifts to his mistake. Jordan, from his spot near the front, pulled out his tablet. His fingers flew across the screen. Camille looked at Nathan, voice breaking. Is it real? Nathan's jaw tightened. He turned to the livestream camera set up for Marcus. Marcus? Can you hear us? The massive screen beside the altar flickered to life. Marcus Whitaker appeared, pale, hooked to oxygen but eyes sharp. Lila, he rasped. What have you done? Lila faltered. Dad. That document is a forgery, Marcus said, voice weak but firm. I never signed it. My lawyer confirmed it this morning. Jordan looked up from his tablet, grinning. And I just pulled the metadata from the law firm's server. The file was created last night, on Lila's personal laptop IP address. Time-stamped edits until 3 a.m. The crowd gasped again. Security moved in. Lila's face crumpled. Dad, please? Marcus shook his head. I'm tired, Lila. Tired of the anger. Tired of the lies. He looked at Camille through the screen, tears in his eyes. Both my daughters deserve what I built. Equal shares. No more fighting. He held up the real will, signed, notarized, dated weeks earlier. It's already filed. Irrevocable. Lila dropped the folio. Papers scattered across the stone. Nathan turned to Camille, taking both her hands. "There's something I need to say," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I knew. About you and Lila being sisters. My investigator found the connection weeks ago, right after the rooftop." Camille's breath caught. "I knew," he continued, "and I still moved forward. Not because of the trust. Not because of the dare. Because I fell in love with you. The woman who walked onto that stage and played like the world owed her nothing. The woman who's fought for her brother, for her dignity, for her music." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the original fake marriage contract, the one they'd signed in secret. Then, in front of 1,500 guests, 3 drone cameras and the entire internet watching live, he tore it in half. Pieces fluttered to the ground like confetti. "I don't want a contract," he said. "I want you. For real. Forever." Camille's tears finally fell. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." Marcus smiled weakly on the screen. "Then get on with it, son. Marry my daughter." The quartet struck up again, this time the wedding march. Lila, flanked by security, was escorted out quietly. No scene. No more fight left. Camille walked the rest of the aisle alone, Jordan wheeling proudly beside her, and met Nathan at the altar. They said their vows under the California sun. Simple. Real. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. Later, at the reception, Camille sat at a grand piano set up on the terrace. She played the Appassionata again, not for a dare. For her husband. For her brother. For her father watching from afar. And for the girl who'd once thought music was lost forever. Nathan stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, watching the city lights sparkle below. The maid had become a wife. The joke had become a legend. And somewhere in the crowd, Lila Whitaker watched in silence, finally understanding that some things can't be bought, forged, or taken. They can only be earned. Or, in this case, played. And that, my friends, is the end of our story, but the beginning of theirs. If this wild ride of family secrets, viral dares, and real love had you hooked, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.